Up next on Warriors Roundtable.
If you want to make it and survive, you've got to realize that the rest of the world will never understand. And you have to come to peace with that. I was trying so hard to pull myself out of it, and I wasn't dealing with it because it was just easier to just drown myself in work. And I got to the point to where I don't want to be alive anymore. So the psychiatrist looks at me and she's like, "You've got probably the worst case of PTSD I've ever seen." And I'm like, there's something to be said where you have post-traumatic stress without the D at the end. If anybody were to ask me if it was worth it, I would say absolutely. It was worth it. It was worth it. Every minute of it, it was worth it because I got to experience a lot of love during that time. And I'm still experiencing it now.
The views and opinions in this podcast do not represent the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, or United States Marine Corps.
After their deployment in 2008, some called them the Forgotten Battalion. But the Marines and sailors of the United States Marine Corps' 2nd Battalion and 7th Marine Regiment reject the way the Forgotten Battalion moniker encourages that narrative of broken veterans. Instead, these warriors simply want to be remembered for the mission they accomplished and for the honor with which they have served their country and their Corps. The majority of 2-7 veterans continue to reflect on their experiences while living their lives and pressing forward. These are their personal stories of resilience, with insight to healthy coping and living with hope. Welcome to the Warriors Roundtable. Today we interview former Staff Sergeant for Fox 27, Master Sergeant Gabriel Guest. Gabe, so welcome back for part 2 of our interview. Last time you and I talked, we had a chance to kind of hear your story with regards to your deployment in 2008. You talked a little bit about what happened afterwards and the decision to finally allow them to amputate your leg. I'd like to shift gears a little bit for the second part of the interview. If we could, let me ask you this first question. At what point during the process after your 2008 deployment did you realize that maybe the stress that you were experiencing was beyond your capacity to deal with just within your own self and that you needed to reach out to others?
Well, several different instances. I had so I mean, when you're in the hospital, you're not in control, which is rule number 1. You're not in control of what's going on. You're basically on lockdown. I couldn't get out of my bed, unfortunately, so I needed help and assistance from everybody. So right off the bat, it was humbling to realize that I had to rely on other people's love and compassion to make it to the next day or just do the smallest functions. So as I'm laying there and I'm going through everything, I remember the doctors telling me one day that I woke up, and this is why I was in Germany getting emergency surgery, that I woke up screaming out fire commands or something like that, and I was like, really? Wow, that's means my blood flow, my cortisol levels are still on high octane, and I wasn't coming back down. So I woke up one morning, and from one of my drug-induced comas, from all the painkillers and stuff. And I looked at the end of my bed, and there was this white-haired gentleman named Jack. And Jack was a Vietnam vet. He had been through, a couple deployments in Vietnam, and received a Silver Star and Purple Heart and NAVCOM with a V. The guy is a proven gunfighter. Well, Jack also came home and went down the road of trying to find, just the road of coming home from war and really not knowing where to turn. And he went through his own trials and tribulations. And he just asked me a simple question as we were sitting there. He just said, "Hey, how you doing, Marine? How you doing, Devil Dog?" And I said, "Hey, I'm good. Who are you?" he started talking, and he's like, if you need anybody to talk to, I'm your guy. So I'm sitting there, and he's from the East Coast, and I said,
Right.
hey, sounds good.
Yeah.
Little did I know that human being was literally an angel. And I mean, I can't say enough about him. He has this huge heart, warrior's heart, was he would like to say. And he didn't push me in that direction, but he made me aware that it's there. And he made me aware and that it's okay for me to seek help. He's like, hey, you're no good to anybody if your brain's not working right. And I said, hey, it's a good, good thing. So I started going, and I just started talking to somebody off the bat. I started talking to a doctor at the hospital, and she was great, and it just felt good to unload. It wasn't just all the things from deployments or whatever. It also was a lot to deal with, like what I was dealing with my body image, what was going on, with my I'm losing control of a lot of things as far as being able to walk and, take out the trash on my own, or just simple stuff like that. So I needed to get my mind right. So it was like a maintenance thing. And then I remember you coming in and talking to me and saying, hey, would you talk to the Marines? And the way that was presented to me back then it was like kind of a mind, body, spirit thing. Your mind and, your mind and your body won't get right if you don't take care of your spiritual aspect of things. So I started seeking help right away. Now, I was kind of shoddy about it. It wasn't like a workout where I was like, all right, 5 times a week I'm doing cardio and all this crazy stuff. I kind of went in once or twice a week, or when I was having a bad time, I just would call her up and say, I need to see you, and she was very patient with me because I was all over the place, Yeah. But that's when I first figured it out, that it's kind of a thing. Yeah. But just recently I've realized that it's not just something that you can just say, hey, I'm going to only do this for this amount of time and then I'm cured. It's
right.
a maintenance thing. It's a lifetime maintenance deal. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just like with anything else, right? Just like working out, you don't get in great shape and then stop and maintain it.
That's absolutely, yeah. It's a great analogy. Absolutely, yeah.
So I appreciate you bringing up the Warriors Roundtable, which is where the podcast got its name from, that you did with us at 2-7 back in 2009, I think it was.
Right.
Had you come out, I think Jack actually came with you, if I remember. Same guy, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. He did.
And you all talked to our Marines and sailors from 2-7 and really just kind of communicated the same thing that you just communicated to me, to us, which is that it's not only is it okay to talk, but it's critical that so much of the stuff that we end up doing in therapy, or the things that end up festering and causing problems, wouldn't ever get to either of those places necessarily if we would just take the time to be humble and to be real and to take care of each other and let ourselves be taken care of by other warfighters. And that was great. I can tell you, I didn't know you very well back then, but at that point, I just heard so many overwhelmingly great things about you and who you were, that I realized if we were going to have somebody come speak to these warriors, it needed to be an alpha, for lack of a better word, that they respected, and you were it, man. So that was just a absolutely stellar opportunity that you and Jack took advantage of, and we'll never know the impact it had. But thank you again for doing that, and in some ways inspiring this.
It was not only I felt the right thing to do and an honor, but those were my brothers, man. And to this day, guys like Keith Branch, Art Carell, Luis Espinoza, Edward O'Hara, Lanford, Jolliffe, Tomlinson, like all my guys, Letcher. I could go on. The list goes on. I would jump on a hand grenade for any one of those guys, and they know that. and I love every single one of them. And I mean, they're absolutely complete lions. And if they asked me to do anything, I would be there in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? So there was no question when that happened. I was like, that's the most well-spoken guy in the world. But, you know, when that time came, I felt like it was the right thing to do. So those guys could get their gear back on after they had taken a knee and faced outboard, drink some water, you know, and take a breather for a second, and then they could repack their kit and go back down range, you know?
Yeah. You know, you talk a bit about earlier about the fact that it's a daily, even with our spiritual, mental, emotional selves, it's got to be sort of a daily maintenance thing. It's not just a one and done. What have you done? What challenges have you experienced? What stressors have you experienced since 2008, 2009? And what have you done intentionally to try to manage some of those things? Because I know, like you were saying, it's a whole lot more than just I was in combat, I got blown up, and I'm dealing with post-traumatic stress. We all have a whole host of things that put rocks in our backpack that we're carrying.
Right. I call them empty batteries. Like when you
nice, yeah.
When you have you got a rucksack, you know, and you got a team and squad, whatever, and everybody's got to pack their gear. Don't hike empty batteries if you don't have to hike empty batteries, you know, this extra weight that you add to your ruck, that'll wear you out over time. So some of the things that I went through, unfortunately, body image was huge. I fought, you know, for years trying to save that freaking leg, and it didn't work out for me. So when I finally lost it, it was a whole, I mean, it was 4 years later after I initially got hit, and it was just a whole new ball game. It was like starting from square one. And that was hard because, you know, I fought so hard to keep that limb. And the deal was, the reason why I fought so hard is because I wanted to get back with my brothers, man. I wanted to go back down range with my brothers more than anything in the world. And I was fighting incredibly hard to try to get there, or as close as I could get to them. And, you know, I got to the point where I was like, oh, this isn't working. I got to fight a different direction. And, you know, the whole thing happened. So it took the wind out of my sails. It was like, I was watching this Jocko Willem interview the other day, and he was like, the count is one. And it was like, this is, you know, he's saying some analogy where an instructor would come out and they'd be doing all this work and working hard and getting to the point, and then they're like, hey, the count is one. So they've got to start all back over again. And you have to dig up the intestinal fortitude and motivation to continue on. And I got to be honest, when I got to the point where I was like, God, this is going to have to happen. It was extremely difficult. It was like losing a loved one. You know what I mean? Like losing a loved one, because it's a part of your body. It's something you grew with, and you know, and you don't want to let go of it. And it wasn't like when they said, hey, you're going to get rid of this leg. It wasn't like, okay, we're chopping it off in 5 minutes. It was like, hey, it's like 30 days. You got to wait, man. And, you know, so for 30 days, I'm looking and wiggling my toes and looking at this thing going, oh, God, I've got to get rid of this. Are you kidding me? So that was hard. And then I remember going into the hospital and then putting the epidural in my back. And right before they did it, I wanted to feel my toes one last time before I was gone. And, you know, when I woke up, I just remember thinking to myself, you know, before I was symmetrical, I had all my limbs and everything. And after that I lost a leg, it was like, you know, you start dealing with the other different things, the stares and the you know, the people not, you know, they want to say something, or they say something insensitive, or, you know, the little things that get to you, and you've got to be patient. And Jack said one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard in my life. He's like, if you want to make it and survive, you've got to realize that the rest of the world will never understand. And you have to come to peace with that. And I'm still working on that to this day.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't quite mastered that yet. But once again, you know, I started seeking the help, the mental help, to work it through. And it was by far the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've done some hard crap, and that was rough. Saying goodbye, and letting go. And I don't know if I'll ever completely let go, because I mean, I've got it. I earn with my leg in my living room. You know what I mean? So, and dealing with that, and then so I fight, and I wind up getting back and going back to work, and that's a whole other bunch of tests, I guess I would call it, life tests, that I wanted to be a Marine. I didn't want something to be taken away from me. I wanted to have a goal, and it wasn't, and I knew it was a lofty goal, man. It was, the odds were stacked against me as sticking around the Marine Corps. And I had good friends and great leaders like Ross that would give me Ross Shellhouse. They gave me chances to prove myself and make a comeback. And, and if I didn't have those opportunities, as hard as they were, I don't think I would have the perspective I do now. And my perspective is not all bad. I've had some wins along the way. There's been some rough patches, but I've had some wins, and you got to fail forward, I think, and I did, and sometimes I just straight failed, so learning how to walk again, learning how to, the constant going and getting your legs. The first year of being an amputee is incredibly difficult because nothing stays on your body. You're gaining weight, the drugs. And that is one of the, if I can just get one message out on this interview that I think would actually help somebody watching this, is that the drugs, and I've seen guys do this, the medications they give you, you go through the process, and they give you the drugs to mask the pain and to help you in the healing process. But they don't really draw a deliberate, definitive line in the sand to tell you when it's time to get off those drugs. And those drugs are a pain in the ass. And when I say drugs, I mean like oxycodone, Dilaudid, you know what I mean? All the different things that help you with pain. They don't help the mental aspect of things. I mean, all that, you're putting a chemical cocktail in your body, which is needed to a point, I mean, there's a point where you have to lay down and let your body generate cells and recuperate. But there's absolutely a point where you have to pop your main parachute, like pull away off your main and pop your reserve, and I'm 100% an advocate of that, and I got severely addicted to the painkillers, not to the point to where I was trying to sell myself on the corner or anything, but
Okay.
I mean, but I got pretty bad, and I was, by the time I had finally lost my leg, I had come off drugs so many times, probably about 6 or 7 times. Wow. We're talking 40 to 60 milligrams of oxycodone a day, sometimes more, sometimes up to 70, 80. And then by the time I got done where it was time to lose my leg, I'd built up such a tolerance and resistance to all these medications that I was worried, that I was going to lose my leg, and pain was going to be out of control. So I went in full bore. I was like, all right, give me what you got. But then I knew that there was another warrior buddy of mine, Sergeant Major, who is way more wounded than I was. So he was definitely a leader I would look up to. And we were just going through our dope withdrawals together. I remember going to physical therapy, and we're just sweating and, praying to the porcelain God. And I remember thinking to myself, this is a problem. This is a problem. And, I consider myself a somewhat decent, tough human being, and if I was having that big of a problem coming off the drugs, I mean, I couldn't imagine a 24-year-old or 25, 19-year-old young man or young woman, coming off these drugs. So I was thinking to myself, like, dealing with the mental aspect, dealing with any kind of post-traumatic, whatever I had, and going through withdrawals at the same time required a lot of help and a lot of maintenance. And it was difficult, and but I had a goal, and I held on to it. And that was my true north, as we were saying earlier, right? You got your compass heading and your true. So sometimes your compass could throw you off depending on what's going on, in your life. So I reset myself constantly, set my declination right. And that's what would happen. I'd go talk to the psychologist or psychiatrist, and she would set me straight, and then I would set my declination again and push forward. And then when it started drifting, I'd go back,
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, there was that. What else? And then, I got to the point to where I was working and I was full blown doing stuff with other Marines. And then it hit me where I was at a point where I was like, okay, man, you're in your mid to late 30s now. And I'm trying to keep up with all these young kids doing all this, stuff. And it was painful to get to the realization that, I can get close, but you're never going to be there.
Yeah.
100%. And I had to make adult decisions on some things where I was like, this is going to be more dangerous than it's probably needs to be. And I could possibly get somebody hurt because my pride is running the show. You get what I'm saying? So that was hard, dealing with my physical limitations,
And just trying to maybe accept that there was a season in your life that you weren't ready to be over, but maybe it was over for you. It sounds
like. That's absolutely true. Yeah, I wasn't ready for it to be over, but it was worth it. That's the one thing. It was worth it. If I had to sacrifice something, and I would have sacrificed more if I had to. I don't think maybe Now Zad was worth it. But I definitely think my brothers were worth it.
Yeah.
100%, and so yeah, I mean, they were 100% worth it. They were worth every minute, every ounce of whatever pain or crap I had to go through. I mean, they were worth it, man, and I'll never forget that. And that once again is a little glimmer of the way forward, so.
But I imagine for you, at whatever point that came, it sounds like it was around your early mid-30s where you realized it wasn't so much that you were taking yourself out of the game, but you needed to play a different role in the game. But it probably felt like you were taking yourself out of the game. That must have been really hard.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was down at the boathouse and I was teaching down there, and I was running some of the training down there and helping train guys for amphib ops and small boat ops, scout swimmer, navigation, cox, and all that stuff. And I was doing a lot of the water survival stuff. And as I was going through that, I was like, hey, I need a real job. And then Ross gave me the real job, and I went to SOI, and I realized, like, wow, my peers are really smart and they're way better than I am. I need to, and I surrounded myself, and he was smart because he surrounded me with people that are way better than I am at everything. They lifted me up to, I like to think, close to their level, and I did that for a few years, and that helped me because I was training guys to go down range. I wasn't doing it myself, but I was close. I was training them on all the lessons I learned, and I was constantly studying and trying to figure out new TTPs and weapons employment stuff so I could teach these guys, make them better than what I was,
Right.
And I'd like to say I influenced that. I mean, the guys, like I was saying earlier in the last interview, I mean, they're phenomenal these days. I mean, they're brains. So I got to be part of that. And once at that point, I was a gunny, and then I winded up getting an opportunity to go to Special Operations Training Group, now EOTG, and I taught there for a few years at the Raised Ropes and Recovery, and that's where I really kind of learned that what my ailments were, like how I could work around them. I got put into some scary situations where I was like, wow, I am definitely an amputee and I probably shouldn't be doing this. When I was when I was at School of Infantry and I was instructing there, that's where I actually lost my leg. So I came in and I talked to Ross, and I said, hey, they told me I got a pretty bad infection, and and it's weird how God works, because all of a sudden I'm with the leader of us in Afghanistan, the main man, you know. Back then it was Major Shellhouse, you know, and I'm sitting there with Ross, and I'm like, hey, this has got to happen. And he looked at me, and he, you know, Ross doesn't get choked up. He's pretty stoic, you know what I mean? That's not really what he does. And I mean, even I could see it in him a little bit. He was like, well, you know, and I could see that it affected him just a little bit, not much, you know, but we sat there, and he said, okay, when's it happening? And so this whole thing goes down, and I'm like, all right. I'm like, I'm going to get back. He's like, all right. And he calls me one day, and we're talking, and we're talking about timelines, and when am I going to be able to get back to run the course? And I'm like, I'll be back in 4 or 5 weeks. And he says, all right. And I'm like, so that was my gleaming light to like get off the drugs as fast as possible, get out of here as fast as possible, be able to drive. So because I had a goal, and he helped me with that. I don't know if he knows that to this day, but like he helped me. And I did. I got myself back to work. And I know it was painful for him. I appreciate it. And then once that happened, I did a couple years at SOI teaching dudes, you know, because that's, like I said, I was learning how to walk during the day, going to physical therapy, and rushing back to work to get to the range with the Marines or do some stuff and you know, do some paperwork.
Yeah.
So then I got done with that, and I got orders over to MEF, like we were talking about. And I went over there and taught raids, so all the raids packages, the raid leaders course, and I did Hearst Master and Assault Climber School.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and I wound up doing that, and that's where I really learned that like everybody's bigger, stronger, faster than I am, and I'm broken. There was a few things I wasn't able to keep up on. I gave it my best, but there's a few things that, you know, I got a rude awakening. Especially like movements, you know, when we do long movements. I had one instance where I wasn't able to make it as far as everybody else, and it tore my leg up pretty good. And I just remember thinking, like, man, it rocked my world. It was like a huge taking the wind out of my sails kind of deal, you know, like, what am I still doing here? But the Marines, you know, they were good about it, and I was one of them. They didn't look at me any differently, and that was a therapy within itself. Was just being with my brothers, and you know, surrounding yourself with people that are loving and better than you in so many different ways, and just taking away what you can from them helped me stay on course. So I wound up getting back to a point where I went to 5th Marines and went on deployment with them. Did a deployment over in CENTCOM, and during that deployment, this is where I was probably tested extremely hard. And a few months into it, my ex-wife decided that we were not going to be a thing anymore. And I was 3 months into it. It was 90 days. And I was like, wow, I've got about 7 months left to go here, you know?
And just to be clear, she was not your ex-wife at the time. She was your wife.
No. She just said that, you know, and I didn't want to tell the kids or anything like that. So I just kept it to myself and rocked the rest of the deployment, tried to keep myself as busy as possible doing stuff whenever I could, which sometimes, you know, idle hands kind of deal. And
how long had you been married at that time, Gabe?
Almost 12 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, with me through all of the trials and tribulations, you know, and she saw a lot of things that quite possibly could have helped the process as far as the separation. But I lost it. You know, I literally was in the worst place in the world. And now I fought to the point to where I was back, and all of a sudden I was back to square one. And if you want to talk about being tested, you know, and I had been through, 33 surgeries at that point, maybe by my leg, you know, with washouts and everything else. And quadriplasties and plastic surgery this and ortho that, and I mean, it was hellacious. And I learned to walk probably 4 or 5 times, and kicking the drugs so many times, and dealing with just everything I had to deal with. And now I literally had come home to I was like, what am I going to come home to? I have nothing anymore. And I was in a low spot. It was downrange, and I didn't know. I was almost ashamed that I had this moment of weakness, and I couldn't. I was trying so hard to pull myself out of it, and I wasn't dealing with it because it was just easier to just drown myself in work.
Yeah.
And that's when, the post-traumatic stress, when I came home and all of the op tempo slowed down, and I didn't have all these crazy things going on, and I couldn't go to the gym or slay myself on a some kind of workout, where all the noise stopped and the silence was just uncontrollably difficult. And I got to the point to where I don't want to be alive anymore. And it was difficult, to say the least. And I'm still working through it, just trying to be a better man, be a better father. I've made so many mistakes, and I've been away doing stuff, being selfish, in my own way, doing what I thought was right, realizing that maybe there's more to life than kicking indoors, but boy, do I love to kick indoors,
Sure.
So yeah, it was rough, and I wound up having to do a lot of soul searching. So I got to the point to where I was like, hey, it's time to hang up the uniform. I love the Marine Corps. The thing I love most about the Marine Corps are the Marines. And believe it or not, as I was on that deployment, and when I came home, my brothers, buddy Mike DeLeon and Matt Regner, and Timmy Palumbo and Roger Turner, all these great people just surrounded me. And my mother and, my family surrounded me with their love immediately, no question. I started doing what everybody does when something like that happens. I start sipping on grandpa's old cough medicine a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where I scared myself. So I started, I came all the way out here. Now I'm stationed in Texas for my final last 100 yards. And I'm acting as a company first sergeant out here at San Antonio, running the show. And it's a different animal, and taking care of everybody else. You kind of lose track of where you're at. Every once in a while, you gotta do a resection to figure where the hell you're at on the ground. And I reached out to brothers of mine, reached out to Jack, went and I seeked help, got my butt over to prosthetics, got a great boss, a guy named Chad Humphrey, Lieutenant Colonel out here. He's great, takes care of me. Great people, all the way around. This whole debt, we've got great people out here, and they, same thing as always. The brothers and sisters don't let you drop. They pick you back up, and
Right.
that's basically where I'm at right now. I'm dealing with this, and I've got good support system, and I'm hoping that I can turn things around with a little help, a little extra help, maybe some wind in my sails to help push me forward.
Well, like they say at Mighty Oaks, warrior programs never fight alone.
Absolutely. It was the Marines and the family I got out here, they're not going to let me fall. They're not going to let me fail. So,
right on.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate your honesty. I know that a lot of times it's, again, when you're a war fighter, to admit that you're having a hard time or to admit weakness seems wrong, feels wrong. It's embarrassing, but it's honest. There's not a single human being that I've ever met that's got it all together. I think God has created us intentionally to have to be dependent not only on Him, but on each other, because it humbles us. It's
right.
Humility is unfortunately underrated. We know a lot of the leadership traits like bearing, courage, dependability, decisiveness, judgment, justice, tact, all that. But unselfishness is one of them, and a great synonym for unselfishness is humility. It's greatly underrated, and I appreciate your humility and not only making the choices you made, but being willing to share your story. I think there's a ton of people, combat vets, who are going to be able to relate to. I mean, most of what you said may be unique to Gabe Guest, but I think everybody can take a piece out of that. The body image, the sense of being misunderstood or not appreciated because of what you've been through, the addiction, the learning how to walk 4 or 5 times for guys that have lost a leg or legs, dealing with a broken marriage, a failed marriage, 33 surgeries, you said, is that right?
Yeah, 33 towards the end, yeah.
And it just goes to show you that we're also made to be remarkably resilient if we engage the right resources, starting with getting God fighting in your corner and getting others fighting in your corner. Let me ask you a slightly different question, because a lot of times these stories of overcoming adversity are remarkable, but we can focus on the adversity. When you and I talked in between these two interviews, at one point we were talking about how post-traumatic stress doesn't have to be a disorder, and in fact, it doesn't have to be bad at all. Just like any stress, it can make us better. It takes more intentionality and more effort, but it can make us better. Do you feel like your experience or your experiences, not just in combat, but all the things that you just talked about, have they made you better? And if they've shaped you in a positive way, how so?
So, yeah, it's like, so everybody likes to throw post-traumatic stress disorder around. My buddy Jack would always tell me that you've been enlightened. When you're back here in this country, you walk around, you don't really need to worry about stepping on IED or, taking RPGs, your vehicle, things like that,
Yeah.
and it's very quiet. You feel safe and you take it for granted. But once you leave and you realize that the world can be a very, very dangerous and destructive place. And it could be a heartless place. It kind of opens your eyes to the dangers that you may face or that do exist. So it makes you aware, and you have a heightened sense of awareness, I think, on some things. And it's because you understand like what human beings are capable of doing, and you understand the ugliness that can come with that. I think there's something to be said where you have post-traumatic stress without the D at the end, the disorder. And I was talking to a really good friend of mine, and what I said is that post-traumatic stress disorder, once it becomes a disorder, it steals your ability to see the light in anything. Steals your ability to see the good in anything. Steals your ability to see the good in mankind and the world, and that takes the wind out of your sails, and it also affects your ability to continue with your life, whatever goals and aspirations you may have in the future seem unattainable because you're dealing with your anxiety. Maybe driving down the street and all of a sudden you feel like your heart's going to jump out of your throat, because it's a bad anxiety attack. I know, I've been there. So once it gets to the disorder part, that's where you just get very depressed and all that. And I'm no expert, but I do know that there are things that have made me a better human because I've had to go through the test. And I came out the other side. I'm not perfect. Oh, man, I've got so many flaws. I am the most imperfect person ever. But I will say that I have not lost my ability to love, and I have not lost my ability to care about others, and I have not lost my ability to continue with my life, wherever that may lead me. And I think that's because of some of the positives that I was able to bring out of this experience. And there are some, I've learned resiliency. I've been tested, physically, emotionally, that goes with spiritually, mentally, in all kinds of different ways. And I've learned human compassion from others, like what the good is in people. And when I actually take a step back and look at all the doctors and the nurses and the Marines and, the guys running out to pull me, away from the vehicle, and, Doc Hancock calling me when I was in the hospital, and, Ross giving me a job, and people giving me a chance to stay with them, be one of the team and give me that opportunity. And, how now I connect with Marines from those days still. And I just, my family, my mother, God bless her. Oh man, she is an angel, because she has put up with so much of my stuff. And, I love her. I love you, Mom. And, I just think that, we were talking about that greater love, deal. And that's absolutely true. I don't think, I think I haven't lost the ability to do that, which is a godsend. And I'm a little bit more standoffish these days. I don't open up in conversations. Sometimes I don't like being in areas I don't know. I always look at the door, all the common, the common stuff. But I think that the experience, and what I was able to give other Marines when I came home was absolutely, it was priceless, and I learned a lot of hard lessons. And, I think, like I said earlier, when we were talking, was it worth it? If anybody were to ask me if it was worth it, I would say absolutely. It was worth it. It was worth it. Every minute of it, it was worth it, because I got to experience a lot of love during that time. and I'm still experiencing it now. And
Yeah.
it's given me the courage to open doors, not be afraid what goes on, and to persevere through some adversity. And a guy, I know there's going to be more.
Yeah. Yeah.
It never ends. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Especially with my luck. Yeah. So
I think it's just it's life, and and God will never give you more than you can handle, and He'll always give it to people that He knows can endure. But sometimes I know you sit there and you wish, okay, enough love, God. Like I can take a little break right now, right?
right.
But you're right. It's peaks and valleys. There's more challenges up ahead, but I'd love to think you're better equipped to handle those too because of everything you've experienced.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. I hope so.
So what are some of the resources that maybe you could share for somebody who's listening to this, who's a little bit further back in their journey, maybe back where you were at some point?
So, to be quite honest with you, I just went to Navy medicine at the beginning, and I just said, "Hey, I need help."
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it was easy because the war was going on, so everybody was very in tune with supporting the warfighter. That was the focus. They had to support the warfighter, support the warfighter, support the warfighter. And so it was easy. So Navy medicine was real. They had a clinic called C5, the Combat Comprehensive Care Clinic.
Okay.
And I also know about Military One Source. You can go to them, and it's you don't want to talk. You don't want your chain of command to know or whatever. You can do that as well. I never really used that for any of my issues with the leg or any kind of combat stress. But I did use Navy medicine on the C5 clinic down in Balboa. And then when I came, there was a long period of time where I just didn't do a whole lot of mental health. I didn't really use it. I didn't do it. Wasn't saying I was doing well. I was just so busy, drowning myself in work and doing my job that I just didn't really notice. I'm sure other people noticed. I mean, I bet you my mom right now would be watching this going, "Oh yeah, you had a lot of signs and symptoms, Gabe. You should have went," But I was just drowning myself in work, and I just figured if I did that, it would do what we needed. So anyway, so when I came here, I was part of a battalion that specializes in your transition or return to duty, RTD, and so I went in, and it was different. It was a different experience. It was like my buddy Clint says, he's like, "Hey man, it's muscle memory loss," and it's because we've been doing this war and fighting this for so long that there isn't 20, 30 combat wounded guys coming in every week, from Iraq or Afghanistan, just here. I'm sure it was more like 100. But, so it took a while to get in to see somebody this time. It wasn't just like a wham bam, it took a while.
Yeah.
So during that time, I reached out to friends, talked to buddies, and I waited and waited and waited, and then I finally got in to see somebody to talk through my issues, and they make you take this test, and they're like, "All right, we're gonna have you take this test. It's a written test, and we want you to, talk about all the crazy stuff that's happened in your life." And I know what they're doing, Dear school, I'm going to resist my captors at all costs. So you got a choice, you can lie on this test and not get any treatment at all, or tell the truth. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell them what's going on. And the poor lady who read this is just like, okay. So the psychiatrist looks at me and she's like, you've got probably the worst case of PTSD I've ever seen. And I'm like, says you. What do you know with your degree and smart stuff?
Right.
So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I don't want to talk about PTSD. I want to talk about the stuff that happened to me on deployment.
Right.
With this past deployment. I want to work through that. And she's like, yeah, that's great, but your PTSD is your real problem. So we went back and forth with that for a while, and I finally submitted somewhat, and I talked to I've talked to friends, and I talked to you more than anybody, and the reason why I talk to friends about a lot of stuff is, like I said earlier, chaps, like, going to some of these appointments is mentally, and I think this is why Mighty Oaks, some of these other places do so well. It's mentally exhausting to try to explain something to somebody who's never been there, and to relive the story over and over again every time they switch out the task organization of the mental health clinic. You know what I mean?
Your provider is,
mentally exhausting. And you got to like spin them back up on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And they're writing a bunch of notes. But if you've actually talked to somebody who's been there, they already know your story, so they already understand what's going on. So I think reaching out to my brothers and picking up the phone, because it's 21st century, we can use cell phones,
right?
And I'm not the best in staying in contact with everybody. But I think that has helped me more than anything. Because it's true, when your brothers are like, Facebook or whatever else, call me anytime. Don't be stupid. Don't do something dumb and blah, blah, blah. They mean it, man. They're not joking. I've had a million phone calls, of buddies of mine from whatever unit I've been with. And I've been with a few calling me with some of the same things. And their story, and you can steer them back on, set their declination again to get them back on course. And quite frankly, that's been a godsend, talking to you every week, talking to my buddy Jack, talking to Ross, whoever, my buddy Eddie, talking to him, whoever will listen and to talk to people that have been there and understand.
I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, how, or what we were talking about earlier, how there's just so much benefit to just having these conversations that, so much of our problems and so much of the therapy would go away or be unnecessary if we just do exactly what you're doing. So that's good. One of the things that when I listen to your stories, whether it's about your experience in combat or whether it's the way you address and attack the issues that you've been facing that have nothing to do directly with combat, is, and I've told you this before, but doing the right thing is usually a very simple choice. It's not necessarily an easy choice, but life can seem very chaotic. It can seem like there's just so much going on around you that it feels like the decision is difficult, but the reality is you didn't necessarily engage a lot of different or unique resources because you knew that the decision that you needed to make was pretty simple. You needed to, whether it was overcoming your addiction, you needed to get up and fight, but you need to get a fire team around you, metaphorically speaking, to support you. And you've done that at every turn. The other thing I'm taking away from what you've been talking about, which I really appreciate, is just you think back to the guys you lost. You think to the guys that you currently know, whose lives and whose memories you honor. And it sounds like even in your worst moments, there's a part of you that gets outside, stops thinking about yourself, just to be blunt, and you start thinking about others. And you think about the impact that your choice, your negative choice or your positive choice, would have on these other people, your friends, your family, Marines you've lost, Marines who you're still linked up with now, who look up to you. And that helps get you through some of your darkest moments. And I think those are both two really good take-home points for all of us. So thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was reading this the other day, and it says when you kill yourself or commit suicide or something like that, and I'm just going to get blunt and get to the point because, there's been a lot of that in this battalion, unfortunately. But when you do that and you make that call, and I'm not above anybody else. I mean, I just spilled my guts for, a few hours here, just talking through all the trials and tribulations that are all Gabe,
Right on.
You don't really solve anything. You make it so you're never going to be able to experience anything. You end your story. It's like pushing stop on the VCR and throwing the VHS tape away, right?
For those that know what you're talking about, right?
Right. We could even go back further and call the beta things. Remember that?
Absolutely,
yeah. Over, right? It's back in the olden days when we used horse. But it also doesn't get rid of your pain. It just gives it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to give that to my kids.
Yeah, right on.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Or anybody else. That's mine to carry. So I'll take care of it, and turn that into something worthwhile. So,
and you got other people to spread load with, but you think about all these folks like your children, and I know you've got a wonderful group of people around you, including your son, and I know, like me, you want your children to be able to look themselves in the mirror and know that their dad was a man of integrity, and that's going to give them a positive legacy and a positive identity to live with for the rest of their lives. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Gabe, thank you again. I really appreciate the time that you spent giving me a second interview to talk at a very personal, meaningful level about some of the challenges you've had, as well as some of the ways you've overcome those challenges. I really think not only has it impacted me, it's going to have a significant impact on anybody who listens to your story. So thanks for being here again tonight.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, chaps. Thank you, sir. And all my brothers out there. Hope to see you next reunion. Sorry I missed you guys this year. Be retired soon, so that'll be great. And then I'll make them all.
Right on. Have a good night, Gabe.
You too, sir.